So let's go on to basic enclosure management now. So we've talked about theories, histories, understanding dogs, where they've come from and why we're doing what we're doing, and why we can all in agreement now understand that we're punishment-based training is not effective and we're all positive redirection force-free. So now we're all on the same page. Let's talk about basic enclosure management and how to take care of the pups while you're actively in the job. Some real actual examples for you. A few things super important as reminders and for training. Crate management and usage. So when I say crate management, I'm also talking about the Zenden, but the crate management. So we've got a whiteboard with crate numbers and the crates are listed and numbered. Please make sure that if you are putting a dog into a crate, that you are putting a note on that whiteboard on the glass door of the puppy palace so that the following staff members know why the dog was put in there, what time they were put into there, their name, breed. Your name is supposed to be put there as well with the staff requirement and the reasons for, so that we get a good understanding of how long to leave them in for and the reasoning for it. So please be mindful of that and using it. Now, handover when coming in and out of enclosures and in and out of shifts. Please, when you are being taken in or out for your morning teas, lunch breaks, need to use the toilets, whatever. If you're going to be moving out of your enclosure for a few moments, notify the person covering for you why the dogs are in Zendens or timeouts if they are. In fact, if there are dogs in those spaces or in crates. There has been a little bit of mismanagement of handovers, particularly in Mellow Bear's lair, where sometimes in those front Zenden rooms, puppies will lay down and be nice and quiet for us, which is what we ultimately want. That's the ambition of the Zenden. However, when you do a swap over of a shift or for a lunch break or whatnot, if you haven't mentioned to somebody that there's a puppy sleeping in that back Zenden, they have no idea that that puppy is there, maybe even to the degree that we then take all of the dogs out of that whole enclosure and we start cleaning it and, huh? Henry's still in the enclosure? What the fuck? How long has Henry been locked in here? All right, let's not do that to the dogs. Sometimes they may need to stay in there for extended periods of time, but please make sure you're communicating handover notes to one another. And that also, and I do see you all doing that quite effectively, but it is super important for the efficiency of the enclosure spaces and for yourselves that those notes about personality clashes or particular dogs we're working on their specific training needs, like the mop bucket type situation, that you're communicating to the next person taking over for you that what strategies you've been working on and what's been happening and working for you. Obviously, we will all have our own individual approaches. Again, it's a reasonably autonomous role. We'll all handle and work a little bit differently based on our experience and what we're comfortable doing. So what works for one might not work for others, but absolutely please be giving those handover notes. When you're working in Mellow Bear's lair, it's very important that you are greeting clients. It's also, in fact, if you're coming through reception and there is a client out the front or in reception, to please be friendly and polite and greet them. The way it looks to a client if you don't is that there are insolent people working here that are unfriendly, and that is the opposite of what we are here at BB's. I know not everybody is in a customer service role, but you can certainly have a good morning, how are you? Or good morning, Henry. Again, I know most of you do that, but just to note that that is part of the requirement of the role. And when somebody is in Mellow Bear's lair working, particularly morning brackets, but across the entire day, the person stationed in that front enclosure, part of your role is keeping an eye on the back of your head at reception. So if somebody comes into reception, notifying the team leader and getting their attention so that that client can be served as quick as possible. So yeah, please make sure that you are letting the person know, and also greeting the client and just a good morning or a good afternoon. Somebody will be with you shortly, or we're on our way. Provision of water for the dogs throughout the days. So obviously we have our water bowl stations. What we need to be seeing happen is those water bowls being topped up frequently throughout the day, tipping out the dirty and popping fresh, clean water into the bowls. Also part of infection control is making sure that the water is fresh and clean and the water bowls themselves are clean. There are some delightful dogs who like to pee and poop into the water bowl as well. Tipping dirty waters should go into mop buckets and then fresh water put in. I don't like to see water bowls overfilled. About the halfway mark is appropriate. If you have to keep filling it to the halfway mark, then so be it, but overfilling them creates swimming problems with certain breed types like labs and retrievers, and then we have an entire bowl of water to mop up after rather than half a water bowl. Multiple times throughout your session watching the dogs, I like to say on the sort of half hour to hour, I would also like a clean water bowl to be being brought into the middle of the enclosure with a water jug, fresh, everybody, come on, pup, laps. Who's thirsty? Let's have a big drink. Good boy. Being thirsty can lead to disruptive behaviours, and some dogs don't like to drink murky, dirty water that some delightful labs like to put their feet in. It makes it mucky. A picky dog is like, I'm not drinking out of that. So by providing that clean water frequently through the day, it actually encourages them to want to drink the water. If you need your water bowls cleaned and returned to you, not a problem. Same like when we're changing mops, let the shift supervisor or person floating know, and we'll give you a fresh water bowl for that as well. So the same thing, when you're changing out of an enclosure, that should be part of your handover to let the staff member taking over know, oh, I just did a water refresh, do another one in 30 minutes time. Part of it should be too, we should have a little bit of personal autonomy and responsibility to one another in that, you know, if I'm coming into the enclosure to take over after somebody else, that somebody else, if I come in and there are wee marks everywhere, the water bowls are all filthy and dirty, the mop buckets are all filthy and dirty, that's not much fun for the person who's just come in to take over on the shift, because then your whole 15 minutes of your initially coming into the enclosure is spent cleaning up that space. The idea is that we maintain and keep that space clean, and it doesn't even get to that point. Again, talking of infection control, it's important. When we're talking about cleaning and equipment as well, we have a lot of equipment in the enclosures, but it does get messy. You absolutely throughout your shifts need to be pushing it aside and moving it around to keep it clean as well. So please also, whether you want to tell the staff member that you just had mops changed or not, can be part of that handover, but making sure that you're not just walking out with the state of the place being a disaster just because it's the end of your shift. Well, I'm out, I'm walking out the door. Again, some responsibility to one another and making sure that that space is kept nice and clean when we do handover. Treat usage. So treats need to have value. Going back on, I understand that by having removed the higher value treat out of our treat pouch that it can be a little challenging. Even so, the treats that we do supply the dogs with, most of them do love them, and we want to maintain that they do still have some value. So scatter feeding them, the dogs, is a fantastic way to get them to snuffle and to do an immediate group settling activity. So if everybody's been really rowdy and crazy in the morning, doing a quick scatter feed is absolutely appropriate and fine. If two dogs may be looking like they're about to squabble, you're preoccupied, you have to clean a big diarrhea poop or whatever it is, a quick scatter feed is fine. Doing a hide and seek in equipment by scatter feeding some treats is fine. However, simply just walking around all day, flicking treats left, right and centre, or shoving food into the dog's mouths all day just because they're coming near you for the treat is not appropriate. The treat needs to hold value. The dog needs to know that a certain behaviour type is required to deliver those treats or to get that reward and that food. Raising of voices, shouting and banging on furniture is also not appropriate. So just because they are all being loud doesn't mean that by you getting louder is going to stop them or help in any way. In fact, often what they will think, going back on the fact that most of often when dogs are all barking, especially in a play space like this, it's fun and community based, you start barking as well and they go, oh goody, Jess is also screaming at me. So if you are going to raise your voice, it's a short, sharp and effective voice raise in equivalent to the punishment. If your shouting hasn't stopped the noise, then that punishment has not been effective, and all it's done is contribute to the noise level and create more tension and more of an environment and atmosphere of noise. So please, please be very conscious of the tone you're using and how loud your voice is. Again, I know at times, and especially like I've said, being a vocal person and raising my voice, that I am the key instigator of the shouting around here. I know the dogs inside out like my own children, and from reception I know which dog is the one doing the barking, and I do get frustrated and yell, Teddy, cut it out, from all the way up there, and I know I'm yelling, but do as I say, not as I do. And certainly no banging on furniture, please. No banging on walls, no banging on equipment, no excessive loud noises that, again, are just confirming for the dogs that the banging is okay. We do have a whistle in reception that is only for a shift supervisor to use, but if they are all being excessively rowdy and you do need a louder sound than them to get their attention, the whistle may be the last protocol that we might use. It is a very few and far between usage, and it's why most of you will have not even ever experienced me bring it out, but every now and then we may use the whistle. It's also really important that you're reporting unusual behaviours and illnesses to upper management and to one another as handovers. So if you, again, you guys are the ones working in with the dogs and you know the dogs. You pick up on their behaviour traits. You know what their base level is. After they've visited for a few weeks, you know them. We all do. And so if they come in and they're just completely unusual behaviour, like being very reactive, or being really shy and slinking, or being really lethargic. That needs to be mentioned to management because, again, dogs don't know how to talk. The way they talk is communicating through their body language and then ultimately their teeth. And like us, if they're feeling unwell or something's not right for them, we often pick up on that before an owner will pick up on it. And it's really important that management is being aware of these things so we can keep an eye on that dog throughout the shift. And so that if it is required, we might isolate them and send them home and say, actually, they're really out of sorts, they're just not themselves. Now, the biggest, most efficient way to manage the space of multiple dogs at once is to proactively be looking after them rather than reactively looking after them. So what that means is we are actively looking at body language, constantly watching them, looking at their base levels, looking for subtle behaviour cues. Sometimes they're super obvious, sometimes they're really subtle, but overall we're looking for those changes and using those changes as our feedback on what dogs we're watching and how we can help those dogs, right? So if we know certain dog types are going to have personality clashes, not necessarily be enjoying one another, we're going to proactively, before we get to the point of them going at one another, remove them from the room. Some dogs get overstimulated really fast by this space. It's not to say that this is not a suitable space for them. It's our job to work with those dogs and work with training them. That's literally what we're here to do. That's why the community book their dogs in with us. If we have a gold standard of the perfect dog coming to us, the only dog that will be here is Chris's Teddy. Because the rest, let's be real, like humans, have personality differences, personality changes, things we're working on, things that they need help with. And part of that is our job to remove them and help them to learn to regulate and giving them Zen-Den breaks and giving them time out. So proactively looking at their interactions amongst one another, their interactions just in the environment and space and going, oh, you're looking like you're going to have just about had it. Let's pull you out now for some Zen-Den quiet time. Let's not push it to the point where we've got two dogs at one another. Or removing dogs as well, like you did on Thursday. So you have two dogs who they've had a personality clash and it was quite severe, like to an extreme that you just didn't like that level of reaction. Let's not even give them the opportunity to practice it again. Take one of them out, try them in a different enclosure and run. There may be times where we have no option and we have to try and work on those two personalities being friends, but for the most often, if we can try and move them around the space to make their experience and your experience better and easier, great, that's proactive care. There is absolutely no reason why, just because a dog walked in the morning and was put in this room, this enclosure, that they stay in that enclosure the whole day. They are absolutely, you are welcome to be moving them and socialising them amongst one another. The use of the Zen-Den and crate is to help the dogs to regulate. So I don't want you having a concept of, well, when dogs come to doggy daycare, that must mean that for 8 or 10 hours they're amongst the other dogs the whole time and that's the experience. And if it's not, then they're not getting the experience and then that's shit and they shouldn't be here. Again, doesn't exist for any of us. I know myself, if I was to do a high intensity sport for 8 or 10 hours, that I would more than certainly be over threshold and ready to scream at the end of it. That's the same for our dogs. So people work full time, really long hours, and that's where they utilise our services. They bring their dog in for those really big days. It's inevitable. The owner cannot simply come for them on the 4 or 6 hour mark. That's where we provide the service to the community. But as providing that service, part of that service is helping the dog to regulate, giving the dog breaks, giving them timeouts, being their advocate. They're not going to do it for themselves. Unfortunately, because of the excitement and arousal level in this space, very few dogs are able to self-regulate. Again, coming down to the domestic dog being so interdependent on humans for direction constantly, especially herding breed lines are so driven like that. We have to do it for them. They're just not going to do it on their own. So please use those spaces often. And it also does not have to be a single dog in the Zen-Den. If you're using the Zen-Den for regulation calming time and two dogs who aren't going to razz one another up are happy to be in there having regulation quiet time, they can both be in there doing that. That's not a problem. Basically, don't wait until it's too late. So prevent it before there is a reaction and speak up before there is a reaction. Managing your personality clashes and differences amongst the dogs can be happening by moving them around the space as well. And dogs' proactive care, dogs who are known to struggle with sharing toys or treats. So the common phrasing or words we use for that is resource guarding, the resource being the treat or the toy. If we know that there are certain dogs like that, we pop them on the list on the board up there and we just remove them when we're doing group sharing activities. So if it's group popcorn time or group enrichment time, that we just know Frankie the Frenchie's never going to cope with being in a room of 10, 15 other dogs and share food in this puzzle toy that he wants to work on. All right, we know that about you, Frankie. Let's move you into a different enclosure while we're doing that with this group of dogs, or let's put you in a crate with your own enrichment or in a Zen den with your own enrichment or toy that you can just focus on. Remembering that every dog as its individual and its own learning experiences, and what works for some doesn't work for others. For Frankie, putting him in the Zen den does not work. He escalates, he's very clever, he knows what's happening, he knows in the other room everybody's playing with puzzle toys and he wants to get in there. The better model and method for him is to put him in a different enclosure. So if he's in the middle, put him in here with the back with the big dogs while the middle are doing enrichment, and vice versa. Simply putting him into a timeout, even with his own enrichment, is just not enough. He has major FOMO, but he also just does not share. He just will not. So we just can't have him in the group when we're doing that. The Zen den and crates are for timeouts and calming dogs. It's to help the dogs to regulate during their play. It's a break from play. It's for a nap time. Adult dogs and puppies both should be taking breaks and napping throughout the sessions. For dogs who are not able to share during enrichment and group feeding times, they're also for injuries and illnesses. So if a dog does injure themselves, particularly if it's some sort of strain, if we're seeing a limp happening on a dog, they go into the crate. We don't want them walking around and moving around. The Zen dens all have too much space for them. So even if they're not a crate-friendly dog that isn't familiar with the crate is where they go if they've got a limp or an injury. These ultimately are decisions of upper management, team leaders and supervisors. However, it is important that as attendants, you're all aware of it as well, and you're aware that if those notes are on the crate board that the dog has been put in for an injury or an illness, that they're not to be removed. Now, the amount of time a dog should spend in those spaces. Again, how long is a piece of string? It's impossible. We can't just say, this is the hard and fast rule, 5 minutes, because that's not the hard and fast rule. Sometimes for younger puppies in the Puppy Palace program, they might need a 2-hour sleep, and if they're still sleeping and they're happy in the crate, let them keep sleeping. They're a baby. Sometimes we might have excessive reactions from two dogs that it was really escalation and they were serious with one another. In those instances, it's a decent time out. It may be a full hour that the dog is spending that time in the Zen den. It's not to say that because they're in the Zen den, they're a bad, evil dog and we hate them and fuck them. Not at all. We make sure they have water, we make sure they have some enrichment, we may go in and do some bonding time with them, cuddles, some calm down, look at me's. But ultimately, they're not, due to the level of reaction, we make the decision they're not ready to come back sooner than 45 minutes, an hour, 30 minutes. Based on the dog in front of you. If you go in and you're doing your training with them, you're doing the looks at me's, the follow my hand, good boy, you're going to sit for me, good boy. All right, well, you know what, you're focusing on me again, you're reasonably settled and calm, your body language is nice and settled and calm, all right, you are ready to come back in. But you go in there and they're just frazzled still and okay, you're clearly not ready to come back in with the group. If the reaction is really up here, it may mean that they simply do not come back out of the Zen den and the owner gets a telephone call asking, can you come for your dog today? They're not socialising well. And again, that comes back on those subtle body moves and changes of, are they unwell? If they are previously a dog that wouldn't react and behave this way, is there something deeper going on that we're just not aware of for them? Did they eat something funky? Sometimes it's not something as obvious on the outside, but maybe inside they're not feeling well. Maybe they have a lump that's starting to grow, and infected ears, sore butt, like you just don't know. So unfortunately they can't tell us directly, but by their body language we can make inferences and make decisions to help them. It's super important when we're looking at temperament matching of the pups that we are also understanding breed types, breed categories. We have narrowed down as a scientific community and a training community specific categories or groups of dogs, you could call it, depending on which avenue you research or look at. Some will say there's 7 categories, some 10, some 5, but the overall concept exists. The ones that I like to put dogs into are our sporting breeds, so dogs who are bred purely for human fun, to do agility and games and focus on us. We've got our hound dogs. Hound dogs are very scent driven. They're dogs that are looking for smells. Also often retrievers, bringing back game, hunting very closely with humans, working closely with humans. Your working line of dogs are very similar to your hound dog. You've got your terrier groups. Terrier dogs were bred for ratting and mice hunting and rodent hunting, so they have a really sharp, hard and fast bite. They have an instant reaction. They don't pause, they go straight to reaction. It's why when we're looking at a terrier that may be behaving reactionarily, we take it quite seriously because a Jack Russell isn't messing around. If he is going to react, he's going to react and he's going to do it with teeth and he's going to bite down. And that's genetic, that's that legs, that's genes. We can't change that in a Jack Russell. So we're not going to have reactionary Jack Russells that aren't suitable for group play here. That's why we do temperament trials and we test them to make sure that they will actually be able to cope and socialise in this space. But even so, they might be feeling unwell on those days. So you have a terrier that's reacting, take it seriously, they mean it, they will pierce your skin, they're not messing around. And that's not their fault. That is just their genetics and their breeding. It's part of their body and their DNA. Your herding breeds of dogs, amazing, so bred for interdependence on humans, cannot make any decision without human guidance. And if they do, their entire ethos goal is details, so really detail oriented, which is why they can be neurotic, they chase shadows, they chase flies, they chase their own tail, they herd the whole group of other dogs, fluffy dogs, they can't cope with fluffy dogs. Your herding lines of dogs can be split into two groups, ones that were bred to herd cattle, ones that were bred to herd sheep. Cattle herders, we're looking at more blue heelers, red heelers, kelpies. They were bred for a hard nip. Again, if they're nipping and taking it seriously, their job as a herder, be cautious, versus a border collie nip. A border collie has been bred to work with sheep. A nip on a sheep could kill a sheep. A nip on a cow, different story. This is where we talk about epigenetics and the observation of it, human involvement. We saw that, and for thousands of years we've been going, whoa, you do have a slightly harder bite, and that does scare the cows. Obviously it takes more grunt, a bigger bark and a bigger bite to get a cow to move. You and you both do that, let's breed you together. Your offspring, you do it and you do it, let's put you and two together and you and two together. And so there is a distinction. So it's not as simple as saying, they're all herding dogs. Yes, they are. Yes, they carry a lot of that detail orientation, but they also carry individual inferences and specifics that we as humans, in an amazing way, in fact, if you looked at the breeding of dogs and human involvement in that over these hundreds of years, it's actually quite incredible, our influence on another entire natural species of animal. But we have to be conscious and mindful working with these dogs now in domestic settings that, one, they're not getting what they require as far as job and life goes. They're not getting the outdoor time that they're supposed to have. Border collies and kelpies were bred to run a minimum of 30 to 50 kilometres a day. Most are lucky if they get a 5K walk on a leash. So it is really important that we temperament match them with one another where they can experience craziness together, which is why you'll find for the most part, I put kelpies and collies in the same enclosures. Every now and then not. Every now and then too many of the same breed type actually creates problems, and splitting them up is a better idea, but just bearing that in mind. When we're talking about guardian livestock and guardian protection breeds, so again, both brands of dogs that come under, they were bred to guard things, but with specific inferences. Some were bred to guard homes, families, equipment, the farm. Some were bred to live isolate lives guarding livestock. You're looking at your Pyrenees, Marima's breeds, Newfoundlands, they're all guardian livestock breeds. When we look at protection guardian breeds, we're looking at bully breeds in particular. So you're looking at your bull mastiff, Rottweilers, Dobermans. For the most part, in a group context, the guardian breeds of dogs have been bred to live isolate lives. For many hundreds of years, we have taught them not to require a pack. It's not to mean that that dog doesn't enjoy meeting other dogs, but being in a room with a whole bunch of mixed temperaments and breeds all in one space is too much for that dog. That is why you will very rarely see those breeds in our space. Again, indoor doggy daycare is not for all dogs, and we just know based off breed traits that that indoor space is going to escalate behaviours and possibly even create negative behaviour patterns that we don't want to be seeing occurring. So you will unlikely to see many guardian livestock dogs here, but it's not to say that there aren't the dime a dozen. Vader is a perfect example of that. She's a guardian livestock mix of two dogs, but she's the most docile, laid-back dog you'll ever meet. So there will be a few, but not very many. The outdoor enclosure. Taking dogs outside is super important that you're practicing safe work practices. No more than 2 dogs on a leash at a time, please, subject to team leadership and management and the size of the dogs. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule, it's a guide for your safety and for the dog's safety. When we're taking them outside, it would be great if we can try to work on some good manners on the leash. Doesn't mean they constantly have to sit. Our obsession with making dogs sit is a little bit ridiculous in our society. They don't always have to be on their butt, but we don't want them dragging you down the wall, down the car park, ripping your shoulder off. They do get very, very excited about going outside. Often, until you're down to the last one or two, you're taking dogs out and there's a group in here anticipating, and that energy is building, and then that's creating nonsense for you. It may be challenging to try and get them to have some nice leash manners when they're around here. Often what I do is allow them to run down the hallway, and from the hallway door I take their leashes and I walk them outside where they can focus on me a little bit easier, because they are away from this room and space where we're removing them from for the most part. So doing your best. Again, I have realistic expectations of what is and is not appropriate and can be handled in those contexts. The dogs are very excited at that point. Ensure that the double gate is always latched before you go into the internal gate. So that external gate outside must be latched, and you must check that it is latched. Ensure that the hallway door is always closed behind you as well, just in case a dog does get out into that hallway while the roller door is up. Dogs outside are not allowed to nuisance bark. Maximum opportunity with redirection techniques is 10 minutes. If you have attempted all of our redirection techniques that we're about to go through in all the games and it is not working, that dog gets brought inside. We have neighbours. Please be conscious of the fact that we do have a childcare beside us, and while the children often are noisier than the dogs, they do have solid blocks during the day where they are having their sleeps, and we don't want nuisance dogs barking and screaming in the enclosure just behind them. We have to be conscious and considerate of our community. We also must make sure that we are picking up all the floating rubbish throughout the day that is coming down into that space, and that at night times we're really thoroughly hosing off and cleaning that outdoor space. I know that during the days when they're making messes and waste, some dogs are so hose obsessed it can be challenging to try and hose directly. I would be encouraging you to work on your leave-its for those dogs, pulling out the hose, and while doing it, asking them to do a sit and a leave-it, or just a stand and a leave-it. Wait, leave-it, wait. Yes, good girl, good boy. And that's something you can proactively practice with those dogs when there isn't mess and waste, so that then in the option when there is mess and waste, or you need to re-top up their water bowls or their pool, they're not just attacking your hose and going bananas over it because it's only pulled out on the rare time to fill up the pool. You need to be using the hose throughout the day when you're out there. So practice when you're not using it, so that when you do need to, you can actually use it. And on that, again, proactive care. If you need to remove a dog because you've had a big messy poop done and you need to hose it, and there's one particular lab or border collie just sheer obsession with that hose head and they're not going to let you hose it, put them in that middle rock area for 2 minutes while you go to do that hose off, put the hose away and bring them back in. Now, some games and equipment to arm you for success in your roles here. We love to play fun games with the dogs because as long as we are keeping them engaged and active, often that helps. We do want self-directed play, which is them engaging and playing amongst themselves, and we don't want to interfere when it's appropriate, nice play with one another. But we also want to be reminding them that we are the guardian in the room, and it is one of you to many of them. So by playing constant games, constantly talking to them, constantly engaging them, they are reminded of your guardianship of them. A few really simple, fun things you can play with the pups. Follow the leader. Okay, follow the leader. Follow the leader can happen using treats. It can also happen using your hands. Follow the leader is making conscious movements in the room, getting the dogs to follow you. It's literally as simple as it sounds. So while you're doing that, you want to be making really conscious movements, more slow, guided, like this, swapping and changing your direction, using your equipment around the room to keep them engaging with you. And at the same time, I don't expect everyone to have the same memory that I do. You may not know all of the dogs' names in the room. Call them their breed. Call them Pup-Pup. Call them my friend. Call them Fuzzy Head. Doesn't matter. They don't care. They know you're talking to them. They're intelligent. They're not stupid. Okay, come on, Fuzzy Head. Let's go. Come on, Fuzz Fuzz. Good boy. Come on, Border Collies. Let's go, Collie Boy. Good boy. Yeah, let's go. Now he's doing that. He can't be attacking Aston if he's following me, can he? Right? And he's doing something great. So that also gives me an opportunity to start providing treats for him. When you're playing Follow the Leader, you can provide the treat straight to the mouth. You can flick the treat around the room, so getting them to collect the treat as you're walking along. Again, they're still following you, but they're also now doing scent work. they're retrieving, they're looking for something, giving their brain something to be working on. If he's retrieving and fetching, he can't be barking, can't be humping, can't be attacking. So he's doing something positive, we can reward for it. You can also get their attention really beautifully if you don't want to be using treats. Oh, what is that? Come on, what's this? Good boy, good girl, right? Using our tone, using our body language, just some clicking of the fingers and they all get fascinated. What's that all about? They're going to follow you around. Magic hand. Magic hand can practice with small groups, it can happen with an individual. Magic hand is so simple to play. We just need the dog focusing on us. They don't need to be sitting to play magic hand. Often they will sit on their own. A big reason why dogs sit naturally and why especially a larger breed like Monster is to do it, in fact even smaller do it even more, it relieves tension in their neck. It hurts their neck to be standing on all fours, looking up at you constantly like that. So you don't even need to be asking your dog to sit. Most often they're going to do it just to relieve the tension. To play magic hand, you literally just need them to focus on the treat in hand and they need to catch it. Just like that. Whee! To be focusing and catching treats, can he be barking, humping, attacking, reacting? No, not really. Maybe the barking part, maybe the excitement of that there's a food about to come, they might get frustrated if you're working in the group. And my encouragement, if that is to happen, is to not reward the bark immediately, but making a note and going, George is frustrated, he's barked at me twice. All right, now he's quiet. Roger, George, good boy, and giving him a bunch of attention then. So being really mindful not to reward negative behaviours, but waiting until you get even just a split second of him being calmer or quieter and reward then. And then reward again when he is, and again and again. And then they pick up real fast that it's when they're calm, quiet, looking at you, paying attention, that's when they're getting their rewards. Touch, super easy. Touch my hand. Wants to touch? Wrong hand, mate. Touch. Okay, he doesn't know it. My consolidated learning hasn't happened for this dog. Doesn't care, doesn't want to boop his nose on my hand. Touch is literally just giving your hand and asking to touch. Now, when you introduce it the first time you play it with them, Monster, you actually don't give them the cue, so you just offer your hand. Okay. If he'd had less food, he would be putting his nose more by my hand, and then I'd reward, and then eventually he'll boop me, and at the time that he boops, I'll add the cue word touch, and then I'll reward for it. So that's touch. Look at me also, super simple. Literally just bring a treat up to your eye and say, look. You don't always have to use a treat for that. You can just point with your finger. Look, yes, good boy. Making eye contact, good relationships are established on eye contact. That lasts for our dog's relationship with us as well. If they make eye contact with you, in the case of Charlie, absolutely would not have done that for you. Okay, the dog's over threshold, that you've lost your battle, it's not going to happen. But when you're trying to build that rapport and relationship, the look is a great way to do that, and it just gives you something fun to play with them. Following your hand, teaching the dogs that your hand is a really great thing. We really want positive associations with our hands because obviously that we're handling and touching them all the time. We're putting leads on, we're grabbing them by the collar. So hand targets, I'm running out of treats, Monster, and I thought I came prepared, mate. Hand targets, simply holding your treat in your hand like this. See that? Follow. Yes, good boy. And then release it and give them the treat. Follow. Good boy. Now I've done a few reps of it and I'm going to remove the treat and I'm just going to ask him to follow my hand. Come. Come. He's very naughty. He knows that not naughty, smart. He knows that the food is in this hand and he just doesn't want to listen. He doesn't care for my games, basically, this boy. He's like, listen, I've had enough of your shenanigans, just feed me. Happy leash time. Really important that when we're doing happy leash time, you understand why we're doing that and what the concept of it is. It's rapport, relationship building. It's helping the dogs who cannot follow your hand, look, touch, be amongst you when they're amongst a group of dogs. It's for dogs who are human fearful and a little nervous of humans. It's all about relationship-centered work. So we're putting and attaching a leash to them so they physically, in the context of being in the room, have to be in your vicinity and have to focus on you, listen to you and work with you. Some dogs need it purely because they're really needy. The golden retrievers, super needy dogs that are human-driven, really human-driven and really struggle to share one human with everybody else. Putting them on the leash and just having them attached to you and walking around with them and giving them positive affirmations is exactly what they're seeking. That's what they want. The anxious dogs are a little unsure of a human. Putting them on the leash and doing a few positive reinforcements, great for building their relationship with humans in general, not just with you, but absolutely also with you. It can be used when we have some nuisance humping, nuisance barking, where a timeout zone isn't necessarily going to do the job or isn't appropriate. And it's an alternative also to timeouts. So it's another thing you can practice with them. Remembering that we don't put a leash on a dog that is being reactionary, unless it's just to attach them to the leash and remove them from the enclosure, because that may sometimes be a better option with large breeds rather than holding the collar. Totally fine to be doing that, but in general, reactionary, aggressive style behaviour displays, those dogs' happy leash is not appropriate for that. If they're feeling aggressive and reactionary, attaching them to a shorter leash on you is going to make them feel threatened in a smaller confined space with so much going on. That is going to escalate and lead to other behaviour problems. So let's not put them on the leash. Let's remove them from the room. Go-go stop, the big ball bounce. So playing go-go stop and big ball bounce with the dogs is a way to essentially razz them up even more, because for us to be able to give the dogs a distinction between being crazy and calm, the easiest way to do that is to give them the crazy, so that then when we ask them to do the calm and the focus, they have a very clear distinguishing factor for that. They also all come in here super excited, really rowdy, happy to be amongst one another, vocalising. So perfect time to go, great, in the morning, let's all do that. So then in the midday, in the afternoon, when we want to do boundary games and calming games, there's a very clear distinction. The big gym ball, we've got a few extras and there's one in the puppy palace, is fantastic. It does require 2 people to be playing with it. I mean, if you want to try on your own one against the wall, you're welcome to, but the dogs go bonkers for it. They're all screaming, frothing at the mouth, losing their marbles. I'd say big ball bounce shouldn't happen for more than 15 minutes at a time, but it's a really great way to get them all really excited, get engaging with them physically, getting them all going rowdy and crazy, so that then we put it away, and like a blackjack dealer, we walk around and tell them all, it's all gone, it's all done, because some dogs will obsess and be like, give me back the ball. And they're like literally Frankie the Frenchie again, losing his mind, his pupils dilated, gonna like freak out because where's the ball? All right, blackjack, it's all done, stop, enough, leave it, it's all done. Bringing out the water bowl at that point, they've all been crazy and hyper, they all must be thirsty, let's give them all big drinks, let's ask them all to lie down, let's physically show them what we're asking. Okay? See how when you do a big sigh out, it's palpable. You can feel it when a person does that. You can feel that release of tension in the body. So do the dogs. Again, being really conscious and mindful that our anatomy, our movements, what we're doing affects what they're doing. So using our body language and our movements for better control of the room and working with the groups. The go-go stop game is very similar to the big ball bounce, where it's run and get them all really razzed and then stop and try and get them to all stop with you. So it might be, come on, let's go, 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 stop, like that. So really excitable type of game. Or let's go and see who stops with you. That sudden erratic movement of you running and moving around the enclosure will send them stir crazy. That's fine. It gives you a place to go to calm them down. And it's also a game to be selective with. It's not a game to play all day, every day, where you're just razzing them up and getting them crazier and crazier. Hide and seek. Hide and seek can be playing hide and seek with yourself. I have done this many times with the dogs, where I get, especially in the big gym, I get in here and I run around and hide behind the equipment, and then I poke my head out and say, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you. Now, I often will choose one dog in the room that I'm focusing on when I'm playing that game, but the rest all play along as well, because they're all curious and like, what is she doing right now? So I'll be like, come get me, and then I'll hide from them, and then I'll chase them, and then they'll hide up in the equipment. They pick it up really, really fast. A dog who particularly likes doing that game is Jamila, the Kelpie. Kelpies like to play that game because they get to chase you and herd you. But you can also play hide and seek with food. So you can sprinkle and hide little bits of treats around the equipment, around the room, and get them to go and seek them. Even toys, you can show them the toy and say, what's this, what's this? Wait, and dependent on the dog's intelligence, calm, focus on you, ability, you know the pups. Duke would 100%, if I told him to wait and stay in the middle of the room, do it while I went and hide 2 toys that I've just showed him. And then I say, go find them, where's the toy? And he'd run around looking for it, and it gives him something to do. He's working his brain, he's working towards something. And okay, he's in a group, so what? Someone else is gonna find his toy first? Not a a problem. We have 20,000 toys. Get another one and hide another one for him. Stations and boundary games. Stations and boundary games are really great. You can be utilising them all throughout the days, particularly midday and in the evening. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about getting the dogs to sit in one space and stay in that space for as long as you can sort of get them to. There should be a distinction between asking a dog to wait for a minute versus asking them to stay in a place. Asking them to stay means, I want you to stay there, I don't want you to move. Asking them to wait means, just give me a moment, I'm going to come straight back to you, or I'm just opening this door and then we're going to go through it. So bear in mind that as well, that when you're using a boundary, most often when you're introducing the boundary to the dog, just a simple wait for 1 minute will be enough just to get them desensitized and used to that boundary. Boundaries and stationing games meaning bringing out either blankets, or we've got a big tub of bathroom mats that you can bring out and put out midday for them to lay on and work on them. Even just standing on the mat on the station and waiting there is beneficial. It's training with them, it's relationship centered, the others are observing. Ideally, we want them to be lying down on that boundary, calmly waiting, taking a little bit of a break. Other boundaries can be the other equipment in the room. So during the days, you might have a particular dog that loves to do agility. We've got a Groodle who comes on a Friday, Bobby, Labradoodle, he's been coming here forever. Bobby particularly takes an affinity to agility and bouncing up and being up high on things. Beautiful game to play with him. Come on, Bobs, up on the equipment. Yes, good boy. There's your treat, there's your lolly. Let's go back down that boundary. All right, let's extend you that boundary. Now wait. Yes, good boy. All right, Bobby. Stay now. Good boy, Free, come here. What a good boy you are, right? Really simple, easy things to be playing and engaging the dogs. And agility equipment. So we do have 2 big wooden ramps. We've got 4 jumps for them. At any point through the sessions and days, you are welcome to be asking team leaders or pulling out of the spaces those equipment and items yourself. Both ramps are working, so we can move one back up to the front to use it up there as well. We also have 1,001 enrichment toys and 1,001 treats. So treats come in any variety in here. Anything that is safe for a dog to eat that is affordable, I buy for them. Doesn't mean they're always all there. Things like carrots. We're out of carrots at the moment. I'm due to go shopping on Monday, but when I do, I buy something like 40 bags of carrots at a time. Dip carrots in peanut butter, cut them into small pieces and fill them into enrichment toys. Just snap them in half and give them plain. Cut them into carrot sticks. I don't care. The dogs don't care. They just love them. It keeps them quiet. It gives them something to munch on. Remembering self-soothing behaviours for dogs, just like for humans, are repeat behaviours. Classically, chewing, licking and digging. So giving them licky mats. We've got 101 licky mats, peanut butters, things we can smear on them. I have in fact also ordered a bunch of Ziwi Peak tin food, so we can put some tin food onto the licky mats for them as well, as a point of difference from peanut butter. It's meat-based, it's healthy. Everything we feed at BB's is of utmost value and quality, so it shouldn't be upsetting stomachs. We don't want to overfeed. We don't want to use every type of treat and food that we have here in one day. We don't want dogs going home with diarrheas and vomits and people reporting sick dogs from all of the food. But it is at your fingertips. You've also got popcorn, the base normal treats, the meals for mutts. We do have Ziwi Peaks still on site. It is there if you need higher value treats. We've got bacon biscuits for the end of the night. I often will put in the end of night tub odd treats like jerkies, fish pilchards, just odd bits and bobs that I know will just keep it interesting for the pups. You're welcome to utilise those. If they're in the washroom or you have access to them, they're for the dogs, they're for you to be using on your shift. The de-escalation and breaking up of fights. We have to be realistic that dogs, like people, are going to have off days, and even though we do temperament trial and do our best to match the dogs to the best of our abilities, we do have young, intact dogs in our business. It is a point of difference from other spaces, and hormones can make dogs a little bit crabbier, a little bit grumpier with one another. Personalities might not be gelling on certain days. At some point, there is going to be reactions between 2 dogs, and you are going to have to intervene and separate and stop them. Again, I cannot stress enough that obviously we are looking for proactive care. So if a dog does have a reaction, you have had to separate them, think twice before that dog comes back into the room with the dog that they reacted at. Sometimes it might be as simple as, you tried to take food off my plate and I went, smack, meh. Doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean I don't want to see you again. You can come back in the room. Same with the dogs. It might just mean you brushed against me and banged me too hard in your play with 2 dogs and that one didn't like it and he went, fuck you. Okay, Fair enough. He got smacked in the face, he didn't like it. Remove him for a little break so he can calm himself down, bring him back out of the zen den when he's calm and settled. It's not a problem. You don't need to really notify management of that. However, two dog personalities not getting along repetitively or reactions being at a level that is one has been pinned down, that's management notification. That's not okay behaviour, and we need to assess legs. We need to say, is it the environment? Is it the dog? What's happening to have caused that? And we need to make appropriate action. To de-escalate and separate dogs when they are fighting. Monster, bup, 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 bup. Come on, lazy boy. You've got a big day ahead of you, mate. We haven't even been bowling yet. All the dogs at BBs will be in collars. The correct placement and way to de-escalate and remove the dog. One, you need immediate action. So no mucking around, no waiting, no thinking for 5 minutes before going and stopping them. No waiting it out and thinking, dogs will sort it out themselves. I don't know how many of you have heard other people say that, but that is a concept that a lot of people think. No, we created a domestic dog that needs all of our interdependences and guidance, so they're going to need our guidance. Do not allow them to work it out. We will end up with an injury. So the second a dog is pinning down another dog, snarling, showing teeth, you're going and you're removing that dog. When you're going to remove that dog, you're going to talk to that dog. You're going to tell them you're coming for them. You're going to tell them you're coming for their collar. They may redirect onto you, but if you give them enough warning, you remain calm, you use a calm tone of voice when you're talking to them, you minimise the chances of them redirecting to you a lot, but you do need to be prepared for it. The correct placement to remove the dog is via their collar. So during the day, proactively working with all of the pups, just collar touch game. So just having your hand near their collars, giving them massages, cuddles, playing with them around their neck, teaching them your hands are great with follow my hand treats. So when that instance happens where you may need to go for their collar at the back here, they're prepared for it and they are okay with you and your hands. There is only one dog currently attending BBs that is not collar friendly, Roger the Groodle. Every other dog here at the moment is collar fine. Doesn't mean they always will be though. Again, if they're having an ear infection on an off day, or they have actually got a bite from another creature or a sore, a hot spot on their neck and they're a fuzzy dog and you don't see it, they may normally be fine with the collar. Today they're not. So you do need to be mindful and aware of it. Coming for them for their collar from here, from behind is the best way to remove them. So immediate action, grabbing them by the collar. Just because they've been reactionary does not mean don't use food. You want to get the dog off the dog that they're aggressing, and you also want to get them out of the enclosure immediately, as fast as you can. So it doesn't matter if you have to use treats to lure them into the room. It's grab the collar, let's go, come on, let's go, move. Monster's actually not in a collar today, but that's the correct placement for it. Now, if you're in the big gym, for the most part, there will often be 2 people in here. One person should be grabbing, the rest should be doing group mitigation. If you're in one of the smaller rooms on your own, you might be doing a scatter feed while you're doing that removal to de-escalate the rest of the group and make it that the rest don't want to get involved in that squabble or fight. Doesn't mean that because you've moved the aggressor, that the other dog stays in the room, but you remove the aggressor first and then you still remove the other dog. You may have to do that because the aggressor was so aggressive about it that you're actually checking for an injury. So you want to feel over the dog, you want to check their neck, you want to notify management, I've had a feel, but management will then also have a feel and look for any potential punctures, scratches, wounds or injuries. The dog that was attacked also needs a timeout. And 99% of the time in our space, if a dog is being reactionary, it's 2. They're both generally doing it at each other, which means there isn't usually a submissive. There will be, out of the squabble, one will end up taking the more assertive stance and one will end up on the bottom, but not because the one on the bottom wasn't going back. Survival, of course they're going to go back. Another dog's going at them, they're more likely to go back. It is very few and far between that if a dog does a harsh reaction at another dog, that other dog is going to give no reaction at all. Certain dogs are trained not to. Certain dogs are trained to turn their head away and walk away. In this context, none of the dogs coming here are like that. So don't behave or think that they will know how to deal with it, manage it, work it out amongst themselves. They just won't.